Hello and welcome. I'm Yuki. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes from 20 minutes of talking to someone you don't know well. Not an argument, not anything unpleasant, just a neighbor or a colleague you don't work with directly or the parent of one of your children's friends. 20 minutes, perfectly pleasant, and afterwards you feel as though you've carried something up a flight of stairs. And when people admit that, the reassurance they get is always the same. Don't overthink it. Just be yourself. Everybody feels like that. I've never found that helpful, and I think it's actually a little unkind because it tells you the problem is in your head when it isn't. Something real is happening in those 20 minutes, and it's worth naming. So instead of asking how to get better at talking to people, I'd like to ask you something else today. How much of the conversation are you expected to invent? Because I don't think you're bad at people. I think you've been handed a much harder job than you realize. Let me show you. Let's begin. I want to start with a sound. It isn't a word exactly, and if you've ever heard two Japanese people on the phone, you'll have noticed it immediately. The listener makes small noises, constantly, every 2 or 3 seconds. A short hum, a yes, a really, a soft. Is that so? We call it Aizuchi, and it comes from a word for two blacksmiths taking turns to strike the same piece of iron. Here's the part I'd like you to hold on to, because everything else comes back to it. If you stop making that sound, the speaker will stop talking. They'll assume the line has dropped, or that you've walked off, or that you're annoyed. The sound isn't decoration. It's how the other person knows they may continue. The very first thing anybody says has been decided for you as well, and this surprises people. You open with the weather, not as a joke about being unimaginative, genuinely. It's hot again, isn't it? It's finally cooled down. The rainy season is late this year. And nobody thinks less of you for it, because it isn't a failure of imagination. It's the door. In a letter, it goes further than that. A formal Japanese letter is expected to begin with a set seasonal sentence before anything else. And there are books that list them, month by month, so you can simply choose one. I want you to notice what that does. The most exposed moment in any exchange, the beginning, is not yours to invent. The same is true of most of the moments that would otherwise be difficult. There are fixed lines, and everybody knows all of them. Someone leaves the house and says a set phrase. The person staying says the matching one back. Someone comes home. There's a line for that too, and a reply. You leave the office before your colleagues, and there's a specific thing you say, which roughly means forgive me for going first, and a specific thing they say back. None of this is heartfelt, and nobody pretends it is. But look at what it removes. You never have to decide how to enter a room, how to leave one, or what to say when somebody does something for you. The hardest parts of an interaction, the edges, come pre-built, and everyone is using the same ones. Even the question of what to call somebody has been taken off you, and I think English speakers underestimate how much that costs them. Here, you attach a small ending to a person's name, a neutral one for almost everybody, a different one for a teacher or a doctor, another for a child or for someone much younger than you. That sounds like a chore to learn, and it is, but notice what it means. You are never standing in front of someone deciding whether this is a first name situation. You are never rehearsing an email opening because you can't work out whether it's too familiar or too stiff. You are never in the position of having known somebody for 8 years and still not being sure what to call them, which is a thing I have watched happen and which nobody ever resolves. The form decides, and you get on with the conversation. Quick pause. I wrote an ebook called The Quiet Reset for anyone who wants fewer forced conversations and more usable quiet in daily life. It's the first link in the description. Anyway, the shop version is even clearer. You'll see the whole thing working at a small shop, and it takes about 40 seconds. There's a bakery near where my mother lives, with a woman in it who I have spoken to perhaps 200 times. She says a line. I say a line. She mentions the heat. I agree about the heat. She tells me what came out of the oven 20 minutes ago. I say I'll take one. She thanks me. And I say a phrase on the way out that has no English equivalent and roughly means, sorry for the disturbance. Now, an English speaker watching that might find it hollow. I understand why. But I have never once left that shop tired. And I have left plenty of 10-minute conversations in London, completely wrung out. The difference isn't warmth. It's that neither of us had to think of anything. So let me stop and say plainly what I think is going on, because this is the part that changed how I see it. In English, almost every exchange requires you to invent original material in real time in front of somebody who is judging it. Think about what you're actually doing. You have to produce an opening nobody has used on them today. You have to find a topic. You have to keep it going, read whether they're enjoying it, change direction if they aren't, and then work out how to end it without seeming rude. All of that is authoring, and you're doing it live, without a draft, while also listening. That is not conversation as most of the world understands it. That is improvisation, performed to an audience of one, several times a day, and then afterwards you wonder why you're tired and conclude there's something wrong with you socially. There's a second half to this, and it may be the more important one: silence. In an English speaking room, a pause is a problem, and it belongs to somebody. Within about 3 seconds, one of you has to rescue it, and both of you know it. So even while you're talking, part of you is preparing the next thing in case. That's the real weight. It isn't the talking. It's the continuous background job of making sure nothing ever stops. In Japanese, a pause is very often just a pause. You'll sit with someone through a long one, and neither of you will experience it as a failure that needs an owner. And I don't say that to be mystical about it. It's simply a different setting, and it costs nothing to change. There's one word here that does an enormous amount of this work, and it's probably the most useful thing in the whole video: Sumimasen. It gets translated as sorry, which is misleading. Depending on how you say it and where, it means excuse me, sorry, thank you, and may I trouble you, all at once. And what it really is a door handle. You can use it to stop a stranger, to accept a kindness, to apologize for nothing much, to get a shop assistant's attention, or to squeeze past someone on a train. One word, and you are never standing there working out how to begin. In English, you have to choose. Sorry, excuse me. Hello, sorry to bother you. And choosing takes a second. And that second is where the dread lives. Even refusing something is scripted, which sounds cold until you've used it. When you're offered something, you're expected to decline the first time, and often the second. We call it enryo, a kind of holding back. So the person offering will offer again and mean it, and the third time you accept. Now, plenty of Japanese people find this tiresome, and I have some sympathy with that. But consider the alternative, which is the one most of us live in. When someone offers you something once and you say no, neither of you knows whether that was a real no or a polite no. So you both guess, and one of you gets it wrong, and somebody goes home feeling they were pushy or that they weren't wanted. A script removes all of that guessing, and it doesn't require anybody to be good at reading minds. Handing something over has a script as well, and this one always makes visitors laugh. When you give somebody a present, you're supposed to run it down. The traditional line means, more or less, this is a worthless thing, but please take it. Said while holding out something you chose carefully and probably paid a fair amount for. Nobody believes a word of it, obviously, and that is precisely why it works. Giving is an awkward act. It makes a small debt, and it can look like showing off. The phrase settles all of that before anyone has to feel it. And the person receiving has their own line back, so neither of you is left standing there improvising gratitude, which is a thing almost nobody does well under pressure. There's a piece of furniture that quietly helps too, and I miss it more than almost anything. So much of eating and drinking here happens at a counter. You sit side by side in a row, facing the cook or the wall, not across a table with somebody's face directly opposite yours. I only noticed how much difference that makes when I moved away. Sitting shoulder to shoulder, you can both look at the same thing: the pan, the fish, the street outside, and the conversation goes on in the gaps. Nobody has to hold eye contact, and nobody has to keep it going, because there's something else in the room to look at. Almost every difficult conversation I've had in my life would have been easier at a counter than across a table. And there's a fixed way to end things, which I think is the single piece I'd most like to hand to you. When people finish work, they say a set phrase to each other. It means something like, "You must be tired. Well done. That was work. Otsukare-sama." You say it to everyone on the way out every day. Ending a conversation is genuinely one of the hardest things in English. And I've watched people do 3 or 4 false endings in a row, each one a little more awkward than the last, because neither of them can find the exit. Here, there's a door and it's marked. Somebody says the line, and the thing is over, and nobody has been rejected. Now I have to be honest with you. because this could easily sound like a country where nobody is ever lonely at a party, and that is very far from the truth. The same system has a real cost. It can be rigid and it is often hierarchical. Which phrase you use depends on who you're speaking to and how senior they are, and getting it wrong is its own kind of stress. Plenty of people here find the fixed phrases hollow and say so. Foreigners often experience the whole thing as cold and hard to get past, and they are not imagining that. Shy Japanese people are exactly as lonely as shy people anywhere. And Enryo, taken too far, becomes a country where nobody ever says what they actually want. There's a word here for people who withdraw from society completely, sometimes for years, and it exists because the problem is real. So this isn't a better way of talking. It's a way of talking with the load in a different place, on the form rather than on the person. That part is borrowable, and none of it requires you to learn a word of Japanese. Let me lay it out simply then. The things that make conversation exhausting are these. You have to invent the opening. You have to supply original material continuously. Silence is a fault that one of you must fix. Nobody can tell a real no from a polite one. There is no agreed way to leave, and you're doing all of it facing someone, with nothing else to look at. And the things that lighten it are surprisingly mechanical. A small sound every few seconds so the other person knows to keep going. One opening line you use every time and never apologize for. One word that begins any interaction so you don't have to choose. Offering twice, so a first no isn't the end of it. Something to sit beside rather than someone to sit opposite. And a fixed sentence that means this is finished, so nobody has to be the one who walks away. If you take one question with you, take the one from the beginning. How much of your conversation are you expected to invent? If the answer is all of it, then the tiredness isn't shyness, and it isn't a flaw in your character. You've been asked to write and perform at the same time, every day, with no script and no rehearsal. And almost nobody is good at that. Which brings me back to that small sound. The hum, the yes. The soft is that so, every 2 or 3 seconds, from a person who is not saying anything at all. It is the least impressive contribution to a conversation imaginable. It contains no information. It would look ridiculous written down. But it is the entire difference between somebody talking to you and somebody talking at a wall. And it costs nothing, and you already know how to do it. Start there. Make the sound. The rest of it is much easier than anyone has told you. If this made conversation feel a little less like a performance and a little more like a shared rhythm, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.